So the two things. Well, one thing is for sure that it happened over the weekend. One thing is something that is potentially rumored that I think would be phenomenal. The first thing, and there are changes to sports within the United States. The first one is the NHL switching their All Star format to the four nations, which I think I know is USA and Canada. USA and Canada, that game was phenomenal. USA won, and then I think it was Sweden and Finland. I think were the other four. I don't. I feel like you probably have to expand that a little bit. Obviously, USA and Canada is going to be big, but there probably has to be some sort of like world team that's like every nation or every country that's not any of those four. I guess in theory, if you can fill out four teams with just those four countries, that's probably a good idea. But it is an all-star event, so you are missing out on some players. But this change for the NHL, I think, is such a phenomenal idea. I mean, I feel like it works with hockey because of how diverse the players are from all over the world. Basketball, it probably wouldn't work. Baseball, it obviously would work. We've seen the World Baseball Classic. I actually wouldn't be surprised if we don't switch to this style of game for baseball also. Like if we did a mini baseball classic for a week instead of the All-Star game, I think that would be a phenomenal idea. I mean, the All-Star game concept unfortunately at this point has run its course and there's so many changes to everything within the game. I mean, the Pro Bowl is one that I don't even the Pro Bowl is one I don't even think they're playing the full game anymore. I'm pretty sure they're just playing flag football now. So it's like they got to figure something out there. But I think what this means for hockey potentially is you're going to see maybe more fans come in and that are interested in the world sports aspect because like it or not, there are fans who really only watch some of these sports who they only watch the World Cup for soccer, or they only, I mean, maybe not the World Baseball Classic necessarily, but I'm sure there's fans who only watch the World Cup, or there's fans that only watch the Olympic hockey or the only watch certain national sports. But I think this is going to be phenomenal for hockey. Now, does this translate to cards? I think I mean it makes hockey the all-star game for hockey a much more digestible product, I think, because the games are good, the games are competitive, and like I said, does it translate to sports cards? I think potentially. I think because you're going to have fans who maybe if they're fans of their all-star players on their all-star team and they have to play with other teams. Like it was very interesting to see like it was very interesting. I saw a video of some Toronto Maple Leafs fan that was just like, "Wait, so you mean we have to root against because the Toronto Maple Leafs captain was on Team USA and Brad Marchand was on Team Canada?" So they were like, again, if you're a hockey fan, you know that Brad Marchand is not really liked very much, but it's a very funny concept that players have to or fans have to root against their own players because if you're USA versus Canada and you want Canada to win, that's kind of unfortunately the trade-off, I suppose there. But the other change here, and I had mentioned the World Cup. The other big change that I think is still being rumored. I don't know if it's 100% confirmed, but I have seen that some of the USA soccer committees have started to move forward with this concept. So the USL is like it is how do I describe what the USL is? It's because like the MLS is the league in the United States for soccer. The USL is kind of like the secondary league for soccer, but it's still very popular. I mean, if you watch any USL games, the fans and the stands are full. So like it is not really televised as much as the MLS, obviously, which the MLS still now is on Apple TV after that massive deal they had a couple of years ago. But they are talking about doing a potential merger with another league and then doing relegations and promotions similar to how the Premier League in England does it. Now, this is not a revolutionary concept, but a revolutionary concept within American sports because it's just unfortunately will never probably happen with any of the four major sports in the United States because the owners spend way too much money on the teams and the relegation and promotion. It's always been tough to find the league that would be able to do this. And the USL, I think, is actually the perfect league. And I think that there's another, I forget what the other league was, but there would essentially be within that. And I don't know if the MLS, I'm sure if we see a large shift in viewership, the MLS is going to want to get involved. And I think for two of the sports within the United States, MLS and NHL, these shifts in how they're changing their all-star game, their sports, like their just overall dynamic of the league. Like I think that they have a potential to move up in terms of the rankings super high for like best sports within the United States. I still think MLS is tough to MLS and soccer within the United States. You really are going to need the USA soccer team in the World Cup to make it pretty far. I don't know if they can win, unfortunately. I think I didn't like the coach they had before, so maybe now that they've really have just completely moved on from Bullholzer, maybe they're going to actually play well. Like the because in my head I always said these players are good. Why are they not playing good? I just didn't understand. Like it didn't make any sense. Like Pulisic and McKinney and all these players play overseas and they're very good overseas, but then they come and they play in the United States and they play teams that are not even as good as some of the teams they're playing, and they just don't seem to play well. And I don't know what that was. I don't know if it's the system that the coach had, but now that they have this new coach, I think that they have a really good opportunity to hopefully make it far in the World Cup. And that's upcoming. So I think these combinations of things will affect sports. They will affect the popularity of some of these sports. And I don't know if this is going to be like a catalyst towards these sports becoming much more popular in um, the sports card industry. I still think soccer is it's soccer. The popularity of soccer comes in waves, and I think we saw one of those waves around 2020, and then into the World Cup. And then I think with Euros, that obviously kind of gets people going a little bit. That gets people excited, which I believe the Euros are this summer, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think. Oh no, no, no. So they were last summer. So they're 2 summers from now. 2 summers from now, or 2026. So then maybe that's not, maybe not, because they're gonna have the World Cup. I'm not 100% sure about that. But either way, these things I think will lead to more popularity within sports cards, because it's just going to be that, like especially within cards, like there's going to be a group of collectors who kind of like the sports, never really got into them, but now that they're seeing a new format that I think is good, that is going to lead to, I think, people moving towards maybe trying to collect some of these cards. So it's going to be big for Tops and Upper Deck and Panini, because these sports all together, Upper Deck obviously is with hockey, Tops and Panini have soccer. I still don't know what they're going to do with those licenses, which, I mean, if I were Tops, that would be the next big license I go after, is trying to figure out how you can get all the soccer licenses. There are so many leagues and so many ways to divvy up soccer that I think it would be very tough. It's probably not as easy as just being like, this is our license now, I would imagine. But I think, for Upper Deck, luckily they have hockey. For Tops and Panini, they're going to have to figure this out. Like Panini has the World Cup, which I think, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, Panini had an extension of the World Cup all the way through, I believe it was the 2030 World Cup. So like they have all the World Cup cards. So like World Cup Prism, I think, is going to be a very important product. I don't know exactly how they're going to go about it. I think 2018 and 2014 World Cup were probably two of the better soccer products of all time. Obviously, 2014, you're getting the first Messi, you're getting the first Ronaldo, you're getting the first Neymar Prism cards. And then 2018, you have Mbappe, who has some 2017 cards, but 2018 Prism is one of his big soccer rookie cards. So like, I think both of those products are going to be very important. I think coming up and I think, unfortunately, because the US like didn't make the World Cup in 2018, like that was a big blow to their popularity within that. What could have been within that 2018 product would have been like, I mean, the Pulisic rookie would have been massive within that product also, but unfortunately he doesn't get into Prism. I think he has a USA card in Select, I believe, but not Prism. So I think going forward, it's going to be very interesting to see how the teams or leagues and these card companies if they can take the fans that have maybe become new fans of their sport or new fans because of these new changes and switching them into sports fans or switching them into sports cards fans. But I mean, the big thing also will be like, how will Tops or which company will end up getting the license if this big soccer league ends up changing? Because again, the MLS started 25 years ago, so it's not like it's still in the infancy of its creation. So there's a potential that, who knows, like that could be, maybe the MLS isn't the biggest league in 10 years. I think that's going to be a big difference in how we view soccer in the United States if this other league can kind of take into effect and start. I would say that it is officially baseball season, obviously, because pitchers and catchers are there. I believe they're started doing all of their like routine warm ups before the season starts. And obviously, Series One is out as well, so it feels like kind of all these things encompass baseball season. I mean, I think it's baseball season until the NBA playoffs, and actually maybe even towards the Eastern Conference and NBA Finals, because I don't know. I mean, the chances that it's one versus two in the Eastern Conference Finals within both conferences is pretty high nowadays. It just feels like the league, although it tries to not be top heavy, it feels like it is very much. And the team, there isn't really much, like the best teams end up winning. It feels like, and maybe I'm being biased because of the Celtics, but that's not the point of this. Um, it is, spring training. College baseball has started. I mean, I don't know if they have like a full spring training, like they maybe just jump right into games, because I know that like I follow Oregon State, which is like Travis Bazana, who that kind of segues into the point of this episode potentially. Is Travis Bazana is one of the guys that I like this year that I think could make. I mean, I'm hoping he makes his debut so that way he'll be in this year's products for Topps baseball. But again, if he doesn't make his debut before whatever that first or second week of June, he'll be in next year. Um, and I think the thing with baseball season, maybe more than any other sport, is that every person who is a baseball collector who enjoys baseball has their own guy. And I think that's one of the things with baseball. There are just so many players that realistically a lot of people have never heard of. And realistically that a lot of people maybe have followed. Like if you, like for example, Travis Bazana, I followed him when he was on a summer league team 2 summers ago, so that's how I know who he is. And then he goes on to be the number one. He was the MVP of that summer league, and then he goes on to win, or not win, no, win the MVP. And then he goes on to be the first overall pick in this past draft. Now, granted, if he's the first overall pick, I don't think it's a stretch to say that I think that he's going to be good because he was the first overall pick. But there are going to be players that if you follow anybody who makes baseball content or anybody that makes baseball card content, they're going to tell you that this guy is like the next guy who's going to make a big splash. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, honestly, prospecting is one of the more fun things about sports cards, and especially baseball, because like the pool of players you have to choose from if you're trying to prospect and you're trying to find like a diamond in the rough is larger than any other sport. And I wonder if that is one of the reasons why baseball cards feel like they're so much more popular than any other sport. I think basketball is probably pretty close. Football, I feel like, is kind of far off. I mean, that just feels very top heavy, where it feels like the money within baseball is very much distributed like across the whole sport. Sure, people like Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout and maybe even Mookie Betts, like Fernando Tatis, some of these players who are like the top players, Aaron Judge, maybe, I guess. But some of the top players, sure, they're going to have a majority of kind of the overall pie when it comes to sports cards and secondary market pricing. But I think prospecting is prospecting, although most things within sports cards now have become gambling, I think it is probably the highest risk, highest reward. I feel like box breaking is like the highest reward. No, yeah, the highest reward. Excuse me, highest risk. Sorry, I think I'm about to say highest risk, highest reward for breaking too. I think what I mean for prospecting, maybe it's the lowest risk potentially, depending on who you're buying. If you are buying anybody in the top 25 top prospects, you are already paying for them to have gone to the league. And if they do go to the league, sure, you're going to, um, I don't know, you could double or triple your money depending on the player. But like, if anybody who knows the player already, the price of that player and the fact that people know them is already baked into that price. So the lower risk, which I don't know if I would necessarily call it lower reward, but like it has a potential for a high reward. It's like if you're just prospecting, you find like random players that no one has ever heard of. Like for example, if you had bought Christian Campbell, who was like a Red Sox prospect, if you had bought some of his cards early on before the last baseball season, like you would have been buying cards of the player who ends up winning the minor league player of the year. So you can find these players if you know they're going to be good or you think that they're going to be good. And if they are fairly unknown, I mean, I would say going around the bottom half of the top 100, I think would, in my opinion, make them sort of an unknown. I mean, obviously 75 to 100, you're at least buying players that are like people have heard of in a way. It's like it's like a sliding scale almost. Like it's like a certain percentage of money that is within a certain player really depends on just where they're ranked. Because I think the other thing with baseball too is that like people will just buy based on the rankings. Like I don't think like because if you were to say who is a better player a couple years ago, Mookie Betts or Mike Trout? I think some people might say Mike or would say Mookie Betts. He has an MVP award, he has multiple championships. Maybe when he was let's just say when Mookie Betts was still on the Red Sox. Mookie Betts on the Red Sox versus Mike Trout in that same year. Some people would probably say Mookie Betts, but I think a lot of people would say Mike Trout. And if you were to compare the prices of those two players, Mike Trout was astronomically higher than Mookie Betts at the time. And it may even just be because Mike Trout, he was like the 24th overall pick. Doesn't really have like a Bowman non-autograph card. So like if you're looking for Bowman cards for Mike Trout, you're kind of only looking at his autographs. He probably has some Bowmans throughout his, minor league career, but like the 2009 Bowman Superfractor Trout, like that card doesn't have any base cards, I believe. So just, if you're listening to this podcast, I don't think this is necessarily advice that you need to take. But if you are someone maybe that's new listening to the podcast and this is maybe your first baseball cycle, or maybe this is you're just getting into baseball, just realize that like everybody has a guy. And I think sometimes the incentive within cards is positive. And sometimes I think negative in the sense that like people are doing it to increase the price of a certain player. But sometimes I think it just happens where maybe people are just trying to share their insights. Like that has also happened in the past where we've seen people who maybe got caught up in a controversy potentially of saying they like this player, and then the cards go up and then they're just like, oh, well, we didn't really mean for that to happen. It's like, yeah. I mean, I think that's probably pretty obvious that they didn't mean to. I think sometimes that can happen within the industry. I mean, we saw it with all of basketball and all of soccer. I think there was a lot of content made around those cards, like around COVID time, and that drove up the pricing. Now, I don't think baseball because the net of players is so wide. No, the pool of players, not the net. I had it reversed. The pool of players is so wide when it comes to who are the top players. And also, you can kind of almost just take pitchers out of it for the most part. I mean, unfortunately, we haven't really seen a pitcher like dominate in the sports card industry. Like Skeens obviously is a kind of an exception for that, but like that's just because he was like one of the best pitchers last year and was like I believe a Cy Young Award nominee, and then he won Rookie of the Year. So it's like sure, I think he probably is an exception to the rule. But I mean, if you think back, if you go way back, think about like a player like Steven Strasburg. I don't necessarily think Steven Strasburg and Skeens are the same prospect necessarily. Like Steven Strasburg was the one that was going to totally take over. And I mean, he did. He was very injury prone. So that led to, unfortunately, his career not going exactly the way that he would expect. I mean, he did win a World Series kind of later on in his career. I think he retired, I'm pretty sure, because of some of the injuries that he unfortunately had throughout his career. But just be wary of this part of the baseball season, because the other thing that happens during this part of the baseball season is the prospects who get invited to the roster are playing against other prospects. So yeah, sure, they're playing with their uniforms, whatever team they're on. So you're going to see highlights of them, but just know that like they're also playing against sort of their peers in the minors. Um they're not like really they're sometimes just not the best. They're not playing the best competition, I think, even though they are playing in spring training. They're playing um they're playing against the best players that they can, but just know that even MLB teams, they're going to be very excited for some of these prospects to come up too. So, if you're looking to buy any prospects, just, be aware that in some cases they're not playing against the best competition, and sometimes people may not realize that they're increasing prices of some of these prospects if they're really making a lot of content about specific players. So today kind of came out of nowhere, I guess. I mean, it might be just that I haven't seen some of the marketing going around this product, but or it might just even be that like it might just show the difference between how what Panini and what Tops are doing right now in terms of marketing what is probably their biggest product. And it might even be just that like maybe they were focused on football this year because basketball is not going to be very good. But today is Prism basketball release day, which is pretty I think I probably talked about this at least a couple weeks ago. I think probably when we started to see info about the team sets and the checklist with like 81 what was it, 81 parallels from for Prism basketball this year. And again, maybe they were more focused on marketing Prism football, and that's why like I didn't really see much marketing from Panini about Prism basketball. Like I saw a tweet today or yesterday about the release, and then I saw people talking about it. The other thing that I saw was that the one of one Wembenyana has already been pulled from this year, which is the second year, and listed on eBay for $140,000. Now, when you're listening to this, I guess maybe it could have been sold for a different price, or maybe the listing has been down. But last time that I checked, it was up there for $140,000. The one of one second year for Wembenyana. And I think it does show quite a difference between what Topps does with what should be their biggest product or what is their biggest product and what Panini decides to do in terms of marketing. Like the past few years for Bowman and for I guess Topps Chrome is another one, and then the flagship, which like you should I think you can kind of tell what products the companies want you to buy based on their marketing. Tops, at least. Panini is a whole different conversation because I think that I don't know. I'm not sure what their strategy is marketing wise going forward, or even if they have any type of marketing budget to put out information about this product or whatever, or what their strategy or goal is. Or maybe they're just like, we're just going to put this out and people are going to buy it and we don't have to do any marketing. I think that is also a reasonable option, just since the fact that like there's so many people who are making sports card content, which is essentially free advertising for Panini, that they're just like, we'll let a sleeping dog lie, I believe is the saying. And they'll just, which I don't think I don't think that that's what they're meaning to do. Like, they're not going to do any marketing if it's going to cost them any money, because I don't think they have the money for it. Um, I think that, yeah, they probably have made a decent amount of money from these Prism releases. But I mean, on the same line, Prism or Panini hasn't really figured out any type of system like what Topps has done with Topps now, where they can pretty much just come out with a card and essentially it'll make them a couple $1,000,000. Like I think we underestimate this fact from Panini because from Topps. Sorry, I'm talking about both, and I'm getting myself a little bit confused. But we're underestimating that fact from Topps that like they can, if they have the opportunity a lot of times to just come out with a card and, like I said, make make $2 million from the release if they just do it a certain way. Um, I think the thing that might be unfortunate actually about this year is that the Luca trade didn't happen earlier on in the season, which I almost feel like Panini should come out with Prism basketball later on in the season to do like this specific thing. Like the trade deadline feels like we haven't seen a trade deadline like this in quite some time, but it feels like moving Prism basketball, their that product back a little bit. Because if they're not going to do two releases, they have to. I think that they have to figure out a way with Prism to make that the product that is the most up to date. Which, granted, like I said, I don't think we've ever seen a trade deadline like we have this past year. So, like, we're gonna see some pretty like we're going to probably see some decent Luca cards coming out of Prism, but they're all going to be with him in Dallas Mavericks uniforms. So that is unfortunate, I suppose. But I think the thing with Tops here, and the point that I think I kind of I started and then I didn't really finish there, was that you should. I think that there's always been a debate about what is the most important product for each specific sport. And I think if you look at the way that the companies market the product, that not Panini, Tops, if you look at the way that Tops markets their products, that I think should maybe potentially determine what is the most important card. And I know that, the market I think is such an important part of this, that the market is determining what is the product that should be the most important. But like if you look at their promotion of Bowman, you look at their promotion of Topps Chrome, their promotion of regular Topps flagship, like those have been their three biggest products that they've done in my opinion, they've done a pretty good job at marketing these products in a way that gets people excited and gets people wanting to buy them. For Prism basketball this year, I just don't exactly see the excitement. Like I don't see, and it might just be because there's no rookies really. There might be Zach Edey, I guess, Bronny maybe, but there's no exciting rookies in this year's Prism, which is very unfortunate for Panini for sure. The other thing that is potentially unfortunate that I saw the other day was that Cooper Flag, the Duke like freshman, was saying that he might potentially stay in college for another year, which would like that would be, I think, one of the biggest sports card stories probably since I think probably since Topps decided that they were going to be taking over the licenses from Panini for the NBA. Because, like I said, I do forget the order, but if this is one of the last years, if next year would be the last year for Prism basketball or for basketball for Panini, and they don't have the play, like if Cooper Flag decides to go back for another year, that means Topps is going to be probably getting Cooper Flag's official first NBA rookie card, which I think we're still waiting on the strategy for Topps. I think that they've done a pretty good job with their other products of the release timing. And I think one of the biggest things I'll be most interested to see what they do and what they decide is how they structure their schedule and when they come out with products. Like, is Topps Chrome going to be their flagship basketball product, or which most likely, like, is Topps Chrome going to be their Prism? Most likely, but there also will be a flagship product, which will be most likely paper. So, how are they like? What points of the year? Like, are they going to treat flagship basketball as like the beginning of the season? This is when the season starts. It starts in like October or whatever. This is an October release, and then Topps Chrome is a release that comes out during the NBA Finals or during the NBA basketball playoffs, or how exactly they're gonna go about it. Because the past few years, it feels like Panini has been asleep at the wheel a little bit. And I don't want to say that they have failed upwards in terms of what they've been able to do in the sports card industry, because I don't even think they've really gone upwards. I think they pretty much stayed stagnant because the products that they have, because Prism is such an important product, because Donruss and Optic are so good, because Select is a pretty decent product. They haven't had to do anything really to change those products. All that they really decided to do is just increase the print run, and that's what we saw with Wembanyama last year. And I don't know if that's what we're gonna. I can't imagine they could have increased much this year just based on the fact that there weren't really that many rookies. So I think, you know, Panini has just been they have been surviving on the fact that no matter what type of marketing they do for these types of products, people are going to buy them, and they're going to be important cards in the sports card schedule. And it doesn't matter if they market them or they don't market them. There is always going to be an appetite for whether it's Prism football or, in this case, Prism basketball. So I think I found an interesting example of how, at least for me, social media can kind of shift some of the way that I think about certain cards, and only seeing things from one perspective, because I have had a this the topic of this episode, the concept has completely shifted, because at first, earlier this morning, I saw someone post about the Bo Nix Topps Chrome card, and somebody was not happy about it. And I believe it was Watch the Breaks who retweeted this, I'm pretty sure. But someone was pointing out that, like, the Bo Nix Topps Chrome card is a card using a jersey that he didn't wear, a jersey from the previous year before he was drafted on the Broncos. And I thought that I was like, oh, well, if one of these cards looks like that, then the rest of them must. But then as I was on TikTok, I saw some people breaking Topps Chrome football, and like the cards look fine. I think they look, based on my thoughts of the Bo Nix being so bad, they actually look pretty good. Like, I had low expectations because of that one card. And then when I saw them flipping through the cards, I was like, oh, these aren't like really that bad at all. And maybe that could be, I don't know. I think it could be an NFL thing with the jerseys. Like, that one, I don't know. That Bo Nix one really, I think, is unfortunate that they had to use a. I mean, we know that Topps uses unlicensed photos like this, and they've done it for the NBA as well. But the fact, it seems like a pretty big oversight, if I'm going to be completely honest. Like, now teams are switching jerseys very frequently. So, like, it's not like, well, it's actually kind of like soccer, which I actually think that jerseys should be more, sports jerseys should be more like soccer, where they're different every single year. I think that would I think it's cool because you can, like, when the jersey is from. Like, sure, maybe if you know the name or whatever, but I think it's cool to, like, have a jersey from a certain year or a jersey from a championship year or something along those lines. But for Topps to use an image and then kind of Photoshop a jersey that isn't a jersey that Bo Nix would have worn during his rookie year, I don't know if I love that really that much. Now, it could also just be that, like, because they had to Photoshop the logos off of them, maybe that's why the jersey also looks that way. Because with the NFL, unfortunately, it's not just like the NBA where you can Photoshop kind of the front part of the jersey, which I would be interested to know if with the licensing, like, because some teams, they have their jerseys, they just say the city. So, like, if hypothetically there's a Celtics jersey that just says Boston on it, which I don't think that, off the top of my head, I'm not 100% sure if they have any jerseys like that. I'm pretty sure they all say Celtics, like their home and away jerseys. I'm pretty sure are white and green and vice versa. One's white and one's green, and the letters are whichever the opposite color. So maybe they don't have that jersey, so it wouldn't be possible. But I think, I don't know, maybe if, like, the cities, like, because the cities aren't licensed, like, so that would, I don't know. Yeah, that would be an interesting concept that I don't know if they would be able to do. And obviously, we're kind of getting to a point where it almost doesn't really matter that much because we're going to be getting the licensed products in the next year or so, anyways. Um, but I thought, like I said, the cards themselves were fine. I'm not a monstrous fan, if I'm going to be honest, of the unlicensed stuff. I think it has its place for inexpensive cards, but it at the same time, you're really, like, I have gotten Donruss baseball before, and it's, like, not good at all, really. Like, but I do think that there is something to say about, like, I know Panini is starting to do some, like, rated prospects. And I think those cards are actually kind of interesting because of that rated prospect, or the rated rookie logo, depending on which one is on there. I think that one is kind of interesting. Uh, but we are finally getting these cards for Topps Chrome Football. And for the most part, they're fine. The other thing that I saw was that Caleb Williams switched his autograph again. Like, again, we're talking about a high profile athlete switching their autograph, which, again, I, on one hand, think it's fine. On the other hand, I'm looking at it and saying, if the cards that they're promoting, like the autograph cards that Topps put out, the autograph is different. Like the preview cards, the preview autograph for Caleb Williams is different than the one that's on the cards. And they're also sticker autos, which, again, I don't love the sticker autos. I don't know. They're, again, within sports cards, there are these things that I guess I'm fine with because there's really no other alternative. But yeah, so Caleb Williams switched his autograph, which, from, like, Topps put out they put out a video of him signing cards, and he signed one of these Topps Chrome cards, or it was top. I think it was Topps Chrome. It was a Topps Chrome, like, rookie stars card. Um, and then when the card, actually, somebody pulled one of them, and it's a sticker auto, and it's a different autograph. So I don't know. I think autographs have to be somewhat written into a contract. Like, they should be cohesive from year to year, like, or at least throughout 1 year, from product to product. I think if you want to switch your autograph on cards, you have to switch it after the year is over. I think if you're signing in person, sign it however you want, because I don't think um that one, you can't really, if whoever is signing a bunch of different autographs for people on the sidelines, you can't really be like, oh, can you sign it a different way or whatever. I guess, I don't know. But I guess it'll be. I'm interested to see what Topps decides to do, or how they decide to promote some of these unlicensed products. I mean, they're going to be getting another NBA one, which I think that with these unlicensed products, unfortunately, with it being like a Topps Chrome, or with it being a product that's like a base product, unfortunately, you're probably not going to see like a ton of autos or a ton of like hit cards coming out of there, which, that, in my opinion, would be one way to switch this issue with the licensing. I mean, I do also, on one hand, I want to give Topps a little bit of criticism there with that, but I do also want to give them a little bit of credit. And I think the thing that I want to give them credit for is what I was saying when I saw the people ripping the cards on TikTok live. The Photoshop jobs and the images that they chose to use, I felt like were really good images. So it just is surprising to me that, like, it, all of the rest of the players that I saw being on the cards that were being pulled, the images were pretty good for the players. So it does surprise me that, like, because Bo Nix is probably one of the bigger rookies in that product. So I don't know why Topps would have to do that. I guess in theory it would be because Bo Nix, they're getting the images from this past year. So, like, the licensing of the images probably is a little bit more expensive for rookies during their rookie season, versus like Tom Brady, it has Patriots cards, which I think that's probably pretty obvious, but he's going to have Bucks cards also. But like the Patriots Tom Brady cards, I thought were decent. And it also could be because of the way that they're facing, and finding the right image for these unlicensed products, I feel like, is very important. And Panini in the past, it feels like, has just chosen whatever image and then they just Photoshop it. But like Topps, I feel like that the big thing that they've done, in my opinion, in this unlicensed battle that they've been having, is that they've chosen cards, or they've chosen images of players that, in my opinion, I think that they've done a fine job at choosing images for the unlicensed cards and making them look as close to licensed as possible. It's obviously going to be, in 100% impossible to be able to do it, to make them look fully licensed. Obviously, I feel like that's probably pretty obvious. But I think if they were to they could come out. See that here's the thing: they could come out with the product and just kind of wing it and say whatever. We don't really care. We're just going to come out with whatever slop, and people are going to open it because it's Topps Chrome and it's football and it's the new product. But again, they have chosen to go with some images that I feel like are much better than what Panini had chose for some of their unlicensed stuff. I'm still I don't know. I still wish that they had maybe just waited realistically. I think unfortunately we're going to have a couple years here of like unlicensed product and like we're going to look back and it's just going to be compared to the other licensed product and we're going to wonder like what Topps was even thinking coming out with those products. I get that they want to capitalize on the rookies and the exclusive autographs that they have, but I think unfortunately they should have just waited for the full license because ultimately in the long run these cards are not going to really be worth it. And on one hand that's good for maybe people who just want to buy a bunch of cards, and maybe it's even good for people like Topps because they are able to sell this product and not really have to worry about what the secondary value of it realistically is. So definitely not. I mean, I don't know. I mean, obviously, sometimes these things come out of nowhere, but there was a the one of one Nebula Victor Wembanyama. His from last year's Prism was up for sale through Golden this weekend, and I was prepared to do like a Monday's podcast to be about that card because I don't know if it probably ends up outselling what his other previous highest selling card was. Because it's already it's on pace and it was going to end over the weekend. But Wembanyama is going to be out for the rest of the season with something in his shoulder, which I, on one hand, know is unfortunate. I am glad that it is something maybe in his upper body and not his lower body, because when you are that large, to be frank, when you're that large, when you're that big of a person, lower extremity injuries, I feel like are much worse than upper body because your lower body is, which these are athletes. So what do I know? And I'm not an athlete really whatsoever. I do run a little bit, but in my opinion, the lower body, you're having to hold up the rest of your body, which in theory, maybe that doesn't make sense. But either way, Wembanyama, unfortunately, is now going to be out for the rest of the season. And I really only saw one person being like, see everybody who was buying these cards. Like, I will, when I see that type of stuff, I'm like, oh, well, come on, go touch some grass, buddy. But at the same time, it was really only like one or two people that I saw that, the speculation's always going to happen. And Wembanyama, I also have gotten some feedback about Wembanyama versus Wembanyama. It's a slip that I'm trying to fix. So, if you catch me again, I'm trying to fix it. Um, he had six, I believe, of the top 10 graded cards from PSA in 2024. He has like the highest number of PSA 10s, I believe now. Like there's records that Wembanyama is breaking that I don't really think will. I don't know. Maybe Cooper Flag can break some of those records once he gets to the NBA. I mean, he seems very popular. Also, this is probably going to lead the Spurs out of the playoffs, and maybe they're going to have another high pick, which would be, if they're able to rebuild this team, that would be great. But actually, no, you know what? I take that back. They could still make the playoffs, I think. In that league, I mean, with Chris Paul and De'Aaron Fox, I feel like they're still a pretty solid team in the West. If I were them, and even if I'm De'Aaron Fox, I think I would want to miss the playoffs to get a higher seed to even have the potential to get a player like Cooper Flag. Like, I would say that is for a franchise, and this is one of the interesting things about the NBA, I think, is like for the NBA, I feel like you have a better shot at rebuilding a franchise by just being horrible for 2 to 3 years than it is to be middle of the pack for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. Like make the playoffs a couple times, maybe you miss it a couple times, you get a sort of a high pick. I mean, I don't want to say the Celtics are a good example of that. Like for 2 years, which I think that also comes down to you got to draft right. All right, the Patriots have also been bad, and it seems like they haven't been able to draft as well. So, and that's a different sport, but I'm just using that as an example. It doesn't always work out. Like being the worst team doesn't always turn you into like a good team in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, I guess we'll see what's going to happen the rest of this season with basketball cards. Like when you have a player who is so electric and actually lived up to the hype. Like that's sort of the thing. I'm surprised. On one hand, I'm surprised. On the other hand, I'm like, well, yeah, obviously that was going to happen. On one hand, I'm surprised that people so quickly just jumped into another player. Like the amount of hype that was around Zion and honestly that whole draft class in 2019, like Harrow, John Morant, even Kobe White was in that class where everybody was super excited about him. The fact that everybody jumped into one player the way they jumped into Wembenyama so quickly, um, I don't know. I've been having this weird thought recently with sports cards, like thinking about where all the money is coming from because it always seems like there is money going around within the sports card industry. And I thought that Sports Card Nonsense had a good podcast. Like, they had a good question the other day that I saw on TikTok. They were like, "Is there a scandal that could happen within the industry that would completely ruin the industry?" And their thought was no. And my thought is kind of similar, where I just, I because they were their whole thought process about that. And this is the point that I agreed with is like, yeah, like maybe it's somebody like Michael Rubin or something gets arrested or something crazy goes on. Like the industry, if they're still making cars, people are going to buy them. So like, I don't see that really being such a crazy thought. And again, there was so much money that was spent on some of these players in 2018, 2019, 2020 that in 2019 specifically, like a decent amount of those draft picks really didn't pan out money wise. Actually, the majority of them didn't pan out money wise because you can even buy Morant cards. He's maybe the best player from that draft. You can buy Morant cards for like pretty inexpensive because of how many there are. And I think that's probably what ends up happening with Wembanyama. Like his cards, there's no way they're going to be able to, the base cards. I think parallels and low numbered cards will hold a decent amount. But I feel like it's just odd that like so many people put money into those players and then again they're probably not the same people realistically, but like then people just jumped into Wembenyama and like all the players from the last quarterback draft class also. So my thought of like where is all the money coming from? I don't know. It's you don't want to go down the conspiracy rabbit hole that it's actually just people who were like laundering money or anything like that, but it like is odd to me that there has been this much money in sports cards for quite some time and that it just seems like yeah, sure, we're not seeing as many high-end super like $1 million cards, but we're still seeing or multi-million dollar cards, but we're still seeing cards in the millions in the high six figures. And we're seeing those pretty consistently, like for what was it? It was a card that I believe it was I think it was maybe the those boxes of the O-Pee-Chee Gretzky cards that sold through heritage auctions. No. It was sorry. It was an article that I wrote for SI. It was an AI card from a non-rookie set. It was a 97 set when he was rookie 96. It was a numbered card. So I believe it was his first numbered card, but it was only the way that the set worked was it was in like a skybox set where each player on the checklist, like the numbers went up incrementally how many cards you had based on the checklist. So I believe number one was Tim Duncan. So he had one card. He was a one of one. And then I think the next one was maybe Grant Hill or I don't remember what it was, but then he had two cards. And then so AI then had three cards. And the card sold for like $700,000. And in that set of auctions, Heritage Auctions announced that they sold like $30 million worth of cards. So again, maybe individual cards are not selling for what they used to, but we're still seeing as a collective like very high prices for the collective. And that also could just be that like maybe auction houses realize that individual cards are not selling for what they used to. So now they're just going to try and sell. They're going to try and acquire sellers for like a ton of cards. And that's how they're going to get their volume. And that's how they're going to get some of whatever the commission or whatever they get from these cards. So this weekend, the card is still going to end, that one of one prism for Wembenyama, and we'll see what ends up happening. I mean, I almost think like with this news, like this is maybe like we talk about good timing for cards being sold. This is maybe one of the worst timing of because you can't really predict that this injury, something like this could happen. It's not like he got injured really like going crazy on the court or something like that. Like it is just really some bad timing for the for the seller and a buyer. I mean, or maybe not a buyer. Like if you're a buyer, this is one of the opportunities where maybe some of these people who put their bids in are going to contact them. Or I feel like they have to probably at least delay this the finish of the auction for this card at least a week because this just happened like on Thursday. So Golden has to do their due diligence and like ask the sellers or ask the buyer if they're going to actually go through with their offer. And I don't think it's unfair to ask them that, but it really is one of the things in this industry that changes because like there really aren't many other industries where you could go to a buyer and be like, hey, do you want to rescind your offer because of this happening? But unfortunately, that is what's going to happen with this season ending injury for him.